My name is Kate Edwards, and this is Beatrice Stein, and we're going to welcome you to Maximum Hospitality Minimal Contact. We're really glad that you joined us today, and we're really eager to jump into our topic. But first, let's introduce ourselves. Beatrice, why don't you start?
Thank you, Kate. So I'm Beatrice Stein. I'm a hospitality consultant, and I specialize in creating training programs, training materials, workshops, seminars for front of the house staff and management. In addition to that, I'm the founder and director of the Hospitality Project. The Hospitality Project trains disenfranchised populations to become service staff in the front of the house of the restaurant, and then place them based on their skill level in restaurants around the city, which helps an untapped labor force for the restaurant industry. Kate?
Thanks. So my name is Kate Edwards. I'm a consultant, author, speaker, and I focus on two areas of hospitality support. One is customer experience, which we'll be talking about today, and the other is leadership. So I support my clients through training, coaching, and also advisement. Today we're joined by Joann Makovitzky, an old friend of the two of ours. Joann, why don't you join us?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks.
I'm Joann Makovitzky, and I am the current managing partner at Community Table in Washington, Connecticut, and the previous partner at Tocqueville and 15 East in Manhattan.
We're really glad you can be here. We wanted to invite Joann in particular because she's sort of living the future. She's ahead of us here in New York City by a week, and they're already doing limited indoor dining. So we're going to talk to her about some of the insights she's gleaned there. And we're also going to talk about what we can look forward to in terms of maximizing the hospitality moments, even though we're in some of these limited situations with all these requirements. This is what we're going to talk about. I just want to address a couple of things. We asked for you for questions, and thank you so much. You posed some very interesting ones. A lot of these will be answered organically. Some will wait till the very end to answer. And then we have a few that actually we can't quite answer yet. So we had a couple questions about how to handle large venue functions, how to handle dancing and clubs, and how to handle club memberships. And that will happen all in phase 4. And we don't quite have enough information to really give details there, but we'll definitely have information about how to maximize the hospitality that you provide to your clients, no matter the size or scope of your business, whether it's right now or coming up in the future. As we go today, feel free to pose questions to the panel using the Q&A box or even the chat, and we will again either answer those organically through the phase of our talk, or I will wait until the end to answer them. I might also intersperse some urgent questions right in the middle. So let's dive into our topic. So Beatrice, you recently went as a guest to a restaurant.
Yes, I did. I went the first week that outdoor dining started in New York. I was curious what it felt like, what it would be like to be a diner in a restaurant again, a strange feeling. And I went to a local restaurant that I knew and that I was comfortable with. And it was, I thought it was going to be relaxing and exciting, and I was nervous because I was seeing all of the things that were not making me necessarily comfortable. The safety and sanitation. They just gave a quick wipe of the table. They didn't wipe like all the rim and the chair. They didn't, I didn't see hand sanitizer out. One of the staff had like one glove on and one glove off, was handling clean and dirty. And the more I sat there, the more I became hyper aware of what was happening around me, and realized that this is what guests are seeing, that they are seeing how we are taking the precautions, what are we doing to keep them safe, and to keep things sanitized. And that was a huge part of my experience.
Right. So it's really different sort of sitting in that seat of a guest than
Yeah.
sitting in the seat of an operator, which for weeks now, actually, Beatrice and I have been talking about this topic, and we've been sitting in the seat of an operator or a consultant, and sitting as a guest is a really different experience.
It was totally different.
Right.
It was totally different than dining like before COVID. Like it was just totally different.
Right. So that would be some of the things we need to really be careful of. So there's all these rules and regulations, but in truth, the idea of safety and sanitation is about trust. And trust is really the new hospitality. So Beatrice, I know you have a point of view about that.
Yeah, I think that if guests can really see what you are doing, before we hid everything that we did in the back of the house. All the cleaning and polishing and preparation that we did before we opened, during service, after service, we all hid that from the guests in the front of the house. We didn't want them to see all of that. We just wanted them to have a seamless experience. But now I think guests really want to see us doing the polishing, doing the things like that. Like if you're doing roll-ups, put that person somewhere in the restaurant, like at the empty bar, since you're not using it, or an empty table. Give them gloves and a mask, show them polishing, wrapping the silverware, putting it in a vessel, putting a cover over it so it's staying fresh. Like, let guests see that so they feel comfortable in the steps you're taking to make them, to show them you care about their safety, their sanitation, that you care about them.
Yeah, and how's that worked for you up in Connecticut, Joann?
We've definitely had a lot of sanitation happening in the dining room with the staff, as well as protections. So I think that has made our guests feel very comfortable, having stations of hand sanitizer everywhere, just in a way overly sanitizing, just letting people know that we care about them by making sure that everything's extra clean and sanitized. I think people are starting to feel more and more comfortable.
Right. And walk us through a little bit. So you have a robust takeaway business, and you also, because you have a standalone operation with a driveway, walk us through some of those points of contact with your guests so we can sort of understand a little bit better.
So we didn't have takeaway prior to COVID. So that's something new for us. I was very concerned with limiting the amount of customers in the restaurant, and yet still reaching our sales goals, or trying to reach our sales goals. So we broke our business down into 3 parts. 1/3 I've devoted to takeaway, which happens in one side of the building. We have tables outside. We pack up people's bags every half an hour. So when they order, it's 6, 6:30, 7 o'clock, that's when they can pick up. We put their names on the bags, and we have tables outside. People, our staff with masks and gloves, pack them up and then deliver them to the table, and people either drive their car up to the table or park, walk, and get them. But everyone is really keeping their distance, and everyone you see, if someone's approaching the table, everyone else will stand back. People have really learned to do that. I'm not sure if they're like that in Manhattan right now. But people really know that this is my personal space and don't come into it right now. Then we have outdoor dining. So I've taken half my seats and put them outside. And then I decided for indoor dining to take it really slow, because I think that's the scariest part of all of this. So I have 3 rooms, and now I'm only using 1 room, which is really 4 or 5 tables at most. So maybe 18 people at most. So between takeout, indoor, and outside, I think I'm still reaching my cover counts just very differently.
Right. And you talked too about how even that pickup moment is a moment to share hospitality with your guests. And then that gets expanded if they're going to sit at the table or if they're going to sit in the dining room. So what has that been like, trying to, because you have so many regulars, how do you navigate that with those folks who want to, show their love?
Well, first, now you can recognize it by what mask they wear. So I know it's Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so I see the mask. I don't need to really see who it is anymore. So that's taken it to a whole other level. And also, hey, it's very, just very concerned. How are you doing? How's we haven't been out of the house, but are you starting to feel more comfortable? Just the regular chit chat. And knowing that it's okay to speak. We're keeping our distance. We have our masks on, and we want to be neighborly and hospitable. So we do have conversations. The rare occasion that food's not ready, things are taking a little longer, the customers are very patient. Well, give them a margarita. Have a drink while you wait. So, again, hospitality. I'm sorry, your table's taking too long. Here's a complimentary glass of champagne. So, I've done that on occasion as well. And, spend some extra time talking with them until the food comes out. So
Yeah.
that's really,
Yeah, and then that idea of sort of eye contact or body language, Beatrice, I know we've talked about this a lot in terms of what you can do. So we've got the limit of the mask, we've got the limit of, we can't see these facial expressions. So what do you recommend to people?
Me? Yeah, sorry. We have to use our body language now. So before you might not have waved at people when they were coming in the door, but now you want to wave to let them know you really acknowledge them, you see them. Or a hand over the heart to say goodbye and thank you, we're so happy to see you, right? Those kinds of body language are really important to be able to communicate with guests, because we can't see their faces as clearly or ours as clearly. And I think also to train staff about what's negative body language, so to make sure that they're aware that if they're standing like with their hands on their hips or arms crossed, that's, even though their face they might be smiling, we might not see that because of their body language. So I think the body language becomes some, and signals and waving and things like that become part of the experience now, to almost over exaggerating to get people to understand the messaging, right? Kate, I think you're on mute.
Something I heard about, thank you. Something I heard about that I thought was great was a restaurant had given their team members like a badge with a full smiling shot of them, so that when this person with a mask, the stranger, approaches you or your table, you can actually see who it is with a big smiling picture. And I think that's a really nice way to extend a little humanity through this very protected moment, because we want to be careful of that. We do want the protection of the mask, and we do want to convey safety, but we want to leave the hospital out of hospitality. So any way we can warm that up through physical gesture or any sort of photograph or representation of warmth is really incredibly helpful. Now, something too that Beatrice and I were talking about is the idea of, as an operator, it's really essential that you walk through your space, walk through your guest journey through the eyes of a fearful guest. So Beatrice, talk about that a little bit.
If you think about all the touch points that guests, as they enter your restaurant, whether it's the hostess being brought to a table, walking through other people, all of those things, you want to think about how you can limit the contact, but you don't want to lose the hospitality aspect. So how do you walk through as a fearful guest, making them feel comfortable, but still giving them the hospitality, but less contact? And if you literally walk through your space and think about all those contact points, what are we going to do at the hostess? How are we going to get them to the table and then seated? What will the table look like? Things like that. How will they get to the restroom, or how will the staff interact with them? Just walk through all those contact points. When they're getting ready to leave, how will they exit? Will it be through a different door? Will there be people who are picking up food coming through the same entrance? Because if you are comfortable coming to pick up food, you might not be comfortable dining outside or inside, but you're comfortable walking over and picking up your food. So do you want those people intermix there, of who's dining in and feels comfortable dining in, and who's not ready for dining in, but wants to be able to walk over and pick up their food? How are you keeping them separate? So again, that fearful guest, or those guests, you're addressing all their different comfort levels as it be.
Right. And I know for myself, the thing I really consider is, in New York City, so many people have middle of the block restaurants, and it's such an asset right now if you have a corner restaurant where you might have two entrances, you might have two windows, one window could be a pickup window. You're really thwarted for options if you're in the middle of the block. So that arrival to the restaurant, like our guests congregating out front, who's opening and closing the door, our guests exiting and entering at the same time. These are all things we want to be careful of, and we want to try to monitor. So similar to what Joann was suggesting with pickup times, even reservation times, having overt reservation times for your guests so they can enter, and we can monitor those who are leaving so we don't get that log jam at the front door. We're even going to talk a little bit later about different roles for some of the service staff, and the host, I think, is somebody who can really help with that at the front door. Let's move into the idea of the various guests that come in. Beatrice and I identified there's really three types of guests. We have this rebel guest, and they really do believe it's still 2019, that it's business as usual, and they're over it, and they just want to get out and be normal. Right. So we've seen these guests. Then there's the compliant guests. They know the rules, they want to work within the rules, but they also want to be out, and so they work with you. And then we've got the high alert guest, and they're very alert about safety, and they're going to look at everything through that lens of suspicion or fear, which is really what you were talking about earlier, Beatrice.
Right. Yeah. I think that you have to be able to talk to your staff and talk to how you're going to adjust to these different types of guests, because they all intermingle into your environment. And so it's like you have to, not only do you have to give the hospitality and the service the same, but you have to be highly aware of which type of guest you're waiting on, and how you can adjust to that, right? And remember that no matter what type they are, there's some shaming going on between guests, between each other. Oh, why are you wearing a mask, or why aren't you wearing a mask? Kind of shaming is going on. And so that you become in the restaurant a little bit of a, policeman or a police in some way of keeping those types of guests and making them all comfortable and also compliant, right?
Yeah, and Joann, what is your experience with that? I know you shared with us you've had people who fit any one of these types dining with you recently.
People are not familiar with how this works yet. So I think it's really important that in our messaging and our communications, we have very clear rules. I think people are looking for that. And prior to entering the door or upon entrance, I'm able to meet my guests outside in the parking lot, which I often do before they even arrive at the doorstep. And if they're not wearing masks, I kindly say, hi, good evening. Can you please put your mask on while walking around the property? And then as they come closer, I explain to them the rules of the restaurant. And we have signs on our door, which are the pledge we've taken with Connecticut on how to keep our restaurants safe. And one of that is to make sure that everyone is wearing a mask while they're walking around the property and throughout the restaurant. So I try and reiterate that. And little by little, I think people are starting to understand. And when they show up without their mask and everyone else has one, I think they immediately realize that they've done something that they shouldn't have.
And you offer them a mask to use while they're with you.
If someone hasn't come with a mask, I have disposable masks that people can have.
Right.
Yes.
So we've heard about that with a couple different restaurants where they have them on a stack of them nearby so that you can offer them to your guests, which I really love. And then Beatrice, you take it a step further because now they've got this mask. So you have this great idea.
So I love this idea that they say that the front of the mask has the most germs on it. And so when a guest is dining, they've come in with the mask, they interact with the guests with the mask. And then where do they put the mask when they're ready to eat and drink? And so Hong Kong was the first one that talked about this, was they gave the guests a logoed bag. And they gave them the bag and said, when you remove your mask, please place it in this bag to keep it sanitized so you can, when you put it back on. Instead of putting it on the table and then there's germs and whatnot being spread in that way, this way it protects it. Also, if you logo it, it's great because they take it home with them. They may reuse it. Not every restaurant's going to give them a logo bag so they can keep reusing it and keep reminding of the experience they had with you and what a great experience it was and how that attention to detail was something, that really, was something really hospitality and attention to detail that made them feel good. There's some place to put their mask while they were dining. And I think, Joann, we had another idea yesterday when we talked about giving, you used to get in some restaurants, you used to get like a little something to take home with you, like you could have for breakfast the next day or a little sweet to have when you got home or whatever. Now Joann's idea was to give them little mini hand sanitizer with a logo on it. So you have this little spray or pump of a hand sanitizer that you can take with you instead of breakfast, you're not going to get sanitized. We thought that was a good idea yesterday.
But again, it's that association between safety and hospitality. You were given a gift. It's something that I'm thinking of you. It's that consideration. But then it's also brand awareness. Like, oh, they thought of me when I go to these other restaurants that might not do as much. Because that's the thing. I recently went out to 2 different restaurants. We were out of the city. And it was a stark difference between how our experience was sort of acknowledged in each one. So the ones where they did a lot for us, that place stayed front of mind. And the other one was sort of the remaining thoughts were, it was okay, but, and you really want somebody to think, no, those people love it. And that's what you were saying, Joann, with your guests, they're coming back, even in a week.
And I just, I really want to say that I know that since you haven't been through it yet, it's not as daunting as what you think. And I think that we can still supply a good amount of our regular verbal hospitality. We just do it with distance and there's less people around. So we still can do it. So where maybe the first few days there was, silence, little by little, you realize that, oh, you can stand there and I can stand here and we can still have we can have our 6-foot distance and we can actually communicate and it's okay. And, speaking to my guests, are you all okay? And like, oh, well, I had a family member or whatever it may be, or this is our first time out. And, we're so glad that you chose us to dine with. They say, this is the only place we'd feel safe, or whatever that is, really means a lot.
Right. And I love too, when you were talking about how you do greet your guests, you do a gesture of air hug and kisses, which I really loved both of those ideas.
Well, I did this because of me yesterday.
Yes, so happy to see you. I love that one, right?
Yeah. We just had a question come in actually from Elvira Ryder. She loves the idea of gifting small hand sanitizers. Are they provided to every person at the table or just to the person that the check is delivered to? Great question. Either of you want to take a stab at that?
I would think if you're giving the bag and the sanitizer, you would give it to everyone. I would say, it's costly, but I would give it to everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, and Joann, you said you have a nearby distillery that you might be able to co-brand with, which could be an opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's see if I'm going to see if we can get some nice lemon peel in there or something that's really nice and fragrant and reminds us of dining instead of sanitizing.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
But if you don't mind, on that point, we actually made it a point to with our spray sanitizer for our tables and chairs, we made sure that it really smelled like good sanitizer, that it was really cleaning, something that you smelled like clean and sanitize, instead of, a gentle perfume or non-fragrant. We said, you know what, we think it's a good idea for people to also smell that it's sanitized, which really goes against our normal hospitality rules where we wouldn't even have a fragrant flower in a restaurant.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, and that leaves
it's that comfort in knowing the sanitation is there. You can see it, you can smell it, it gives people a comfort level.
Right. It's interesting. We just had an interesting question that just came up about this topic from Susan Pasquantonio. She's an event manager and she works with a caterer who feels that overt displays of cleaning and protection will diminish the guest's experience of a small wedding that she's helping with next week. She feels that it's important to show these actions, but any tips to help her caterer understand the need?
That's a good question.
Well, to me, I'll jump in, and I think it really is about perception, and that's why we started with that. Perception is reality for people. So if they perceive that things are clean, they will believe it. If they perceive that things are not clean, they won't believe it. What we want to avoid are question marks in the guest's mind. So if whatever we can do to demonstrate clean, and so for her, if she doesn't want things to overtly fragrant, let's say, like Fabuloso, we know will totally overwhelm anything. But, Joann was talking about the smell of alcohol. Alcohol, I think, is one of those neutral disinfecting smells that could work. But it also could be the perception of seeing people cleaning things. So, like Bea was saying, like creating roll-ups in guest view, or actively wiping things down or wiping handles or chairs in the guest view to demonstrate that. In terms of changing the caterer's mind, or your partner's mind in this, I think it would just be focusing on the idea of perception, and that you can't do too little in terms of trying to create a perception for people. And you have to be active in that. You can't hope they think it. You have to be active in creating the perception, which is actually the reality. In this case, it's the reality. We are actually cleaning things.
Well, that would be a great gift to give the guests upon entering the wedding, is a logoed hand sanitizer that smells great. That maybe that would help put everyone at ease and eliminate any unwanted odors.
And they can use it as they wish to make themselves feel safe in whatever situation that comes their way during the event, right?
Right.
And same with having some extra masks around, or even fun logoed masks for the wedding.
Yeah, because it's about setting the tone, and I think it's a perfect segue into our next idea here. But really, it's on us to sort of set expectations with our guests. So I love that idea, Joann, of setting the tone with the guests and even with the caterer by saying we're going to focus on sanitation as one of the first things that happens. That could be a really great way to start, which again sets the expectation, but shows and demonstrates sanitation alongside hospitality. Now, in terms of those expectations, Joann, you were talking about how you talk about changed expectations at the restaurant when people make reservations. They hear about it in an email, and then you reiterate it when they arrive. Can you walk us through what's the tone you're trying to set? What expectation have you changed?
I guess safety is first. Everyone's health is first. And in order for us to create a safe and wonderful dining experience, we have to sort of get that out first. So let's arrive properly. We're not taking very many reservations. People are calling and they want the reservations. And I say, I wish I could take you. We're really limiting how many people can be on the premises right now. We want you to feel very safe. I don't want people to feel that there's people waiting at the door and hovering. So really spacing reservations. So that could be on the phone, and when they go to Resi and try and make that reservation, their chances are they're not going to find the one that they want. But once they do, they make a reservation, and a note does come up with, please wear the same message, please wear the mask when you're walking around the premises or when you're in the dining room. We say that again. Then when they arrive, it's on the door, and then I gently remind them again while we're walking to the table, or one of the staff members does that as well.
Right.
People are alert. It takes a little while, but I think if people feel that we're taking these precautions, they're going to be able to relax and actually have a nice dining experience, instead of feeling like, oh, there's no control here, everything's awry. So I think getting a lot of that up front will put them at ease.
Right. And do you also talk about, we just had a question that come in that I think jives with this perfectly, but are you limiting how long a table can stay? Do you have a front and back end time for guests so they know how long you're hoping they'll stay for?
We usually have a 2-hour turn time. And since I'm not using the full capacity of the restaurant, if people are dining longer, I'll put the other people in the other part of the restaurant. On occasion, I've had to say, if it's really not going to be very long, 15 minutes maybe. Fortunately, we do have some outdoor couches and things where people can have a drink, and everyone's fine with that. They're very happy to sit there.
Right.
And wait for their table. But people, I find, are very patient and understanding, especially when they see you're taking all the right precautions, and it's not about putting more bodies into the restaurant.
Right.
It's really about the safety.
I love that. So there's the verbal expectation setting, and then there's the physical expectation setting. So for instance, we've heard of a lot of people who are changing how they're setting their tables, or even not setting their tables. Beatrice, do you want to take the lead on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about how we used to set the table before, we had everything out on the table. It looked lovely when people arrived. you had a candle or flowers or whatever it may be. Salt and pepper might be on the table, and full settings, glassware, all of this. Now, I can't imagine sitting at a table fully set. It would be hard. You didn't know who walked past it, who breathed on it, who touched it, anything like that. So I saw something in Vegas where they put a sign on the table that says sanitize. So when you sit down at a table that says it's been sanitized. And then once your server greets you and takes the order, they begin to bring the roll up or the setups or whatever it is. So you know it's coming fresh to your table from that server. I love that one. I also like the one with the landing table where there's an extra table next to your table. That was out of California, where everything goes down on the landing table and then the guests move it onto their table. I thought that was an interesting concept of sort of tabletop. Maybe putting the sanitizer on the table as the new candle.
Right. Yeah, and I talked recently to a friend of mine who works for M. Tucker, and they do all tabletop and kitchen design, among other things. But she said she's getting a lot of requests for trays so that things can be delivered to a tray, put on the table, and then everything that's dirty can be removed by the tray. So people are starting to think about that. It minimizes contact with the glasses, with the plates, with all the things the guests might touch, which I really like. I also spoke to a friend who lives in the real future. He lives in Austria and has a family hotel there with a fine dining restaurant. And he was very clever. Right when this happened, he realized, I'm going to have to create distance. And in his case, it was 3 feet of distance, so 1 meter in Europe. And he developed with an industrial designer what he calls a plank that is about a 3 foot long tray essentially, but it is long and narrow. It's got little runners on the bottom, and it's the same width as his regular 2 or 4 top. And what they do is they slide it to the middle of the table to deliver all their food. Any food things go on that plank. It stays on the table, and then when people are finished, they put it back on the middle, and they wait until everyone's done, and then they remove everything that way. So it creates a lot of security for the team in particular, that they don't have to get too close. And it also creates a new experience at the table for the guests. So now they get to serve themselves their plates, they get to put their plates on the plank, and it becomes an interactive moment. And in his words, he calls it table culture. So he's changing the culture of the table in that way. He also does, which I think is really cool, is a box. So when you arrive, you have it's like a fabric covered box on the center of the table that when you open it, it has a little note on the inside. If it's 2 people, 2 glasses, 2 napkins, and then 2 of all your silverware plus additional silverware. And it basically has a note about how it's actually very tongue-in-cheek, and it says the fork goes on the left and the knife goes on the right. And he tells you how to set your table, which becomes, again, a moment of experience at the table, and also a moment of sort of surprise. And I love the idea of this box because it feels like it's just for you. I think if I were to do it, I would do something that you could actually wash, be clear that you can clean it, because fabric we can't clean so well. But it could be a box with a serviette on the inside that then people unfold, something that we are clear has been cleaned and sanitized for your use. But these are, I think, really fun ways to play with the service moments at the table without anybody even having to be there.
Right. And let the guests be able to take it for themselves, as opposed to all the handling that happens from the staff. This way, they feel more comfortable in being able to grab those things themselves, right?
That's right. So then about your steps of service. So we always think of the steps of service as being so important, and especially fine dining has way more steps of service than normal. And Joann, you have a very elegant restaurant. It is a fine dining restaurant, and you've been overt about trying to change some of your steps. So can you share a couple of the things that you've adjusted?
Well, as we mentioned before, with napkin roll-ups, we've never done that before. So as guests arrive and they're seated, the captain would come over and then set down plates with the napkin roll-ups instead of having a seated table, a set table. So that's something very different. We open wine, but I'll give them a taste, but after the wine's been accepted, I say, I'm gonna leave you to serve your wine for the rest of the evening if that's okay. So they serve wine, water instead of being served. We deliver a clear glass water pitcher to the table. They get washed after every single serving. Even if we're just refilling it, we take a new pitcher. So we'll just leave water pitchers at the table. We also I tell the staff just to limit the amount of times that they go to the table to really, when they are clearing, to try and clear as much as they can at once. And it's okay if they leave glasses and things, because they have a lot more room on the tables than they used to. It's okay if you're leaving things. When people, especially when it comes to dessert, it's okay. When they get up from the table, we'll clear it then. So the clearing part, we've really limited. And I think it's been working okay. It's a work in progress, let's say.
It's hard to change the hospitality muscles. We're also trained to take away the straw, or, remove the empty bread plate, or do things like that. Have you found that they can't help themselves? They want to go and do the service, or is it because of things like masks, it's easier for them to adapt?
I think a little bit of both. I think we're fortunate. We have a hand sink right next to our dish drop, where we have, extra gloves and sanitizing solutions. So, it's now become our habit. We drop dishes, we take off our gloves, we wash, we start again. So things do clearly take a little longer, but I think that the messaging that I give my staff is it's okay. Everyone's here to have a good time. No one's in a rush. The priority is the safety. So take the time to go through these safety steps. And the staff is, of course, a little tentative as well. So they're happy to hear that. And again, I think it's been working very well.
Great. And we just had another question come in. Are your staff wearing gloves when delivering drinks, or are you utilizing hand sanitizers or hand cleaning?
We use gloves. We wear gloves. Our staff wears gloves while the customers are in the restaurant. I mean, even while we're even preparing, right? As they start work, they put gloves on. And we just change the gloves frequently. You go through a lot of gloves and sanitizing frequently.
Right. Yeah, so the sort of setting expectations, that happens with our team members for sure, definitely with our guests. So then it really begs the question, really, how do we train our teams? Because it's really important that they understand what's going on. So Beatrice and I, we've been talking about, there's these new service considerations. So, we've established it's not 2019 anymore, it's 2020, which means some of these high touch moments in fine dining or even regular dining, they just can't happen anymore. So let's walk through some of these moments, Beatrice.
So one of the things that I was thinking about originally when COVID first came, is I was thinking about how we traditionally used to take care of the table. The server, if you had a model of server, runner, and busser, everybody came and went from the tables at different times. They brought clean or took dirty, and you drop things in before, before COVID, you drop things in the dish room. Let's be real, they didn't always wash their hands after. They were definitely not using gloves then. And that model doesn't necessarily work. As Joann said, you have to be really diligent about what you're picking up that's dirty and being clean. So one of the ideas that Kate and I had talked about was that you have people who do clean and people who do dirty. So your server only brings what's clean. And let's say your support staff, your busser, becomes more of a sanitizer that's walking around and cleaning the high touch areas, entryway, doorways, screens, rails, all of those types of things, bathrooms, but they're only taking dirty from the table, so that their hands are only touching dirty, and the server only has clean hands, is only bringing clean. So that as another way, a different approach, but again, the same thing of keeping the sanitation at a very high level of who's touching what and when, right? Or showing the cleanliness of that. I think the bathroom, the entryway, and the exit are really important, especially if you don't have an open door, if people are touching that doorway in and out. And one of the conversations we had yesterday was about the bathroom. I'm always the person after I wash my hands and then you have to push the bathroom door to get out. You've just kind of destroyed your clean hands. So the ability to have use your towel to open the door and then dispose of your towel maybe on the outside of the door is something that Joann had recommended. That was another way to be able to that high touch moment, the guest feels comfortable exiting the bathroom and dropping their towel, their hand towel or whatever outside the door, and even having sanitizer there. I think Joann made that recommendation yesterday, that you could pump your hand then again if you felt uncomfortable touching the door. Things like condiments on the table and people high touch, you know, bringing in individual condiments as opposed to having salt and pepper on the table. Or if you're bringing a salt and pepper shaker to the table, maybe it's wiping it down before you set it down in front of the guests, showing that you've just sanitized it before they're using it. Those types of things make people feel comfortable. When I dined out, I had a burger and they gave me little packets for condiments, and they gave me a pile of packets, and I was sure that when whatever I didn't use was going to go back and get recycled. So maybe using ramekins for condiments, or if you're giving them the packets, be really limited and just keep bringing more if they need more, as opposed to overcrowding it. And then what do? Do you throw them out, or do you recycle? And then who touched it? So you again, all of the high touch areas are something to really be aware of. Marking the table. I know some people, a friend of mine in DC said they are marking the table. But the box kind of eliminates that, so it's a great option instead of marking. A lot of people are just bringing the water on the table, leaving the bottle on the table, and letting guests pour it themselves, just like Joann had mentioned with the wine. I think all of those types of things, again, when you're walking through and looking at the guest experience, like we spoke about at the beginning, and really focusing on those high touch areas. Where do you keep these areas clean? Show that you're keeping them clean, and what are you eliminating or doing to make the adjustment on things that would normally be multiple people touching it before it got cleaned, removed, you know, sanitized.
Right. Yeah, and you know, we talked a little bit too about sort of limiting chit chat. We know especially guests who haven't been out in a while and who are your regular guests are going to want to show their love. They want to interact. They want to hear everything that's going on. And Joann, you had a nice way of addressing that in terms of setting expectations with your guests, but also with your team. Can you share that as well?
I'm sorry, are you talking about wearing the masks, interacting with?
Yeah, and you also sort of set the expectation that we're not going to spend too much time with you, right? Yeah. Before yes. People come in. So I love the way you put that.
So one thing that we put on our menu is we ask people, I'm just going to go back for 1 second. I guess during the first few days, the one thing that stood out to me as a problem and I was uncomfortable with was the fact that we were masked and had gloves on, but then people would sit down at the table and they'd take their mask off. And I was like, this just doesn't make sense. This isn't working. How can we solve this issue? So I put a little note on the front of the menu saying, kindly wear your mask when conversing with our service staff. And everyone saw that right away. I also mentioned it to them as they're seated as part of, you know, enjoy your dinner and kindly please put your mask on as your server approaches your table. It was a really quick fix, and I think that it was appreciated, made the service staff feel better. There was a comfort level between sort of this unstated hierarchy in a way that was uncomfortable. So that's how we solved that problem. And again, I think it has gone away.
Right. So generally it's about really trying to maximize the moments at the table with your guests in terms of serving and clearing, even in interacting. You had also mentioned, I think this is worth bringing up, how you originally did your orders. You had people actually write on their menu, if you could share that, and then how you've made an adjustment.
Well, I think it was a little bit of a process. When we first started, we actually had people order in advance, and it was takeout, and then they'd sit at the table, take their own takeout. We called it a posh picnic, and we would serve them drinks, but they would have to take the food out of the bag and that was the end of it, except for drinks. So that was sort of, I guess, our phase one. And we really didn't like that. And even though the guests sort of went with it, we could see everyone was very eager to have their a la carte service again. So then our next step was, again, we were very fearful of interaction. We gave people the menus and we would give them a pen and we'd say, can somebody please volunteer at the table to take everyone's order, and then we'll come pick up the menu and we'll place that order for you, just to limit the amount of exposure to you and our staff. So we did that for a week and a half maybe, and I spoke with our staff recently and I said, how is everybody feeling? What is your comfort level? Do you think will everyone feel comfortable taking orders again? And we started taking orders again because we didn't like the fact that we didn't know seat numbers and we sort of had to auction off the food. So no, the staff didn't like that. I didn't like that, but I wasn't going to push them if they didn't feel comfortable. So I really feel like the customer has to feel comfortable. Our staff has to feel comfortable. So I think it's this really slow build to create the right harmony between all of that. I think that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Yeah, that's what I really gleaned from our conversation is take it slow, take it slow, take it slow. Don't push some of these aspects of service, and have conversations with your team to glean their comfort level, and also with your guests as well. So you can learn a little bit more before making changes. Something that we talked about too was really this idea of, there's new service roles. So if we look at the host, the server, the runner, the busser, server assistant, and the bartender, we have to be aware of how they fit into the service. And I love that you use the word harmonious, Joann, because there's the harmony on the inside with our team, and then that harmony is going to extend to our guests. But that host, I think really is key for setting the tone, sharing any sort of new rules, but really it's about removing anxiety. That first hospitable person, they're going to demonstrate that they're hospitable, that they're considerate of you. We also think that maybe opening doors for them could be a really nice way to say, we're ready for you and we don't want you to have to touch too much stuff, if that's possible. The server and runner, and I put these two folks together because they both are in charge of bringing things to the table, and we might consider using them for delivery of clean stuff, so that we leave that server or server assistant or busser for cleaning duties or service of any used or dirty items. And then we've got to think about that bartender. We've had questions here, and I've had a lot of questions about bartenders and the bar. But they're the ones who will eventually have face-to-face contact. So it's essential that they uphold the rules even to the nth degree, especially too because they're standing. We all know in a restaurant, everybody's seated, the bartender's standing, they will stand out simply by that. So they sort of have to be the rule setter in terms of their behaviors and actions for the restaurant. And Joann, you had said too that you have one position. You have a smaller restaurant and you're able to just do everything with servers, which has worked for you so far.
Mm-hmm. Yes, everybody does all of those functions. So again, I think there's just a lot of hand washing, a lot of changing gloves, a lot of sanitizing. And again, just not having the same type of packed restaurant, we have the time to do that.
Right.
So I think, can I just mention something about the bar really quickly?
And I had something also. So.
Yeah.
So one thing is, some people have come in and wanted to sit at the bar and clearly they can't yet. So what we've done is we really loaded up the bar with tons of candles and flowers and different objects so that people know there's not a place for them. So it's really a visual so that they understand the bar is not functioning as we don't have nowhere to store our beautiful bar stools. So I've left them there, but the bar is now covered with other things that would not make them feel welcome to sit down.
I think the other thing to remember is that service bar, and traditionally it's where service staff likes to hang out and chit chat, and they all kind of clump together at the edge of the service bar. And if you're putting stickers on the floor to to guide guests in one direction to the bathroom and back or whatever it is, maybe some stickers on the floor to keep service staff at a distance waiting for their drinks at the service bar so that the guests don't see that clump of servers kind of, not social distancing and hanging out and all chit-chatting with the bartender, which is traditional. Also removing any of the condiments or things like that, where servers used to handle the garnishes, that now the bar, it's on the back bar, it's covered, it's only the bartenders touching it. And those types of things I think are important to remember at the visual of the bar and what's happening at the bar, even though nobody's sitting at it at this time, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just in the interest of time, I want to just move on with some sort of new things to consider. Just looking at some of these considerations here. Something that you had brought up yesterday, Joann, is finding some humor, which is sort of an extension of humanity. You know, it really is, that's part of the fun of dining out, is you have fun with people, you get to know them, and you can really interact with them in a very personal and human way. How have you found ways to bring humor into the interaction with your guests?
It's, it's random. It's the, mocking on people a little bit that don't show up with masks. It's like, but you just have to say it in the right way. Oh, I see you haven't been watching the news lately. There's a, you can't, you have to come in with a mask, but just trying to get people to laugh or whatever, just a common experience that you had together, and just making fun of where we are right now. But then also being grateful. I think that's the other side of it, is making a little humor about it, whatever it is that we're going through. And then the backside of it is say, we're so lucky that we're here, and we're grateful for being here. And again, I even tell our customers, we're going to take one step at a time. It's, this is in process. This is not the end result. And we're going to continue to grow and build on the experience that you're having today. So the next time you come, it's going to be a little different.
I love that, because Joann, that's what I always train my people on, is service is a conversation. And we have to remember that we can converse with these guests and share the experience that we're having. I love that you're saying we're going to continue to build on this. So I think that's a really great thing to share with your guests, that this isn't a stopping point, but we're going to continue to expand. We might have to flex backward, but to share that in a conversational way, I think is helpful for everybody involved. Just
it makes them feel part of it. And I think it's very important for the people who dine in your restaurant to feel part of it. And I think that's why they come to your restaurant too right now, is because they do have a vested interest in it. And they want to see your success, or they want that experience that you provide, but they want whatever it is you are providing, and they want to be part of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we are swiftly approaching the end of our time here. So I do want to get to some questions. Our first question of the day, actually, no, this is a little bit later, but we have somebody who asked a question. Joann, you had mentioned comping drinks, and this is something that Beatrice, you and I spoke about too. So they ask, standard practice is comping drinks. How do you take into account that the more one drinks, the less likely they are to distance, mask, etc.? And along those lines, are restaurants thinking about limiting drinks or lowering the threshold for cutting people off? So I'd love to hear both of your perspectives on that.
I'll go first. So I'm a TIP certified trainer, so I'm used to training in alcohol, being alcohol aware, and how to serve responsibly and how to cut people off. And this is one of the things that Kate and I talked about when we started this conversation, is we really need to bring to the forefront about, if people become intoxicated, if you think about it, they're speaking loudly often, they're spewing, they've lost their inhibitions, they're touching, they're doing all kinds of things because and alcohol has taken over. And so I'd be really highly aware of over serving people right now because of that you're jeopardizing your staff who has to interact with them and the other guests around them. And so I think it's really a time to be highly aware of serving responsibly and being aware. Also, a lot more people are driving than taking public transportation. I would imagine, Joann, that's what you have. And also more people are riding bikes in this city. Either they have a bike or they're doing the city bike. And that's just something to be aware of, is that if they cause harm or injury to themselves or others when they leave your establishment because of that, you want to be aware of that also. So I think serving responsibly is really important right now. Yeah.
I love that. Anything else to add there, Joann?
I mean, I absolutely agree. And I noticed that, our closing time's earlier now. And I feel it used to be people would drink and stay late. They're not doing that anymore. So I don't feel that people are having that, at least in my community, that let's go out and party. It's more, let's just go out. And that's almost enough. They don't need to take it to the next level. And yes, we're very aware of that. I do think the alcohol consumption in the restaurant has gone down.
Right. Interesting to hear. We had a question too. Do you have a procedure for paying the bill? Have you made any changes to contactless credit card systems or cashless? Joann, I'll let you go.
We haven't. We're, sanitizing and wearing gloves, and feel that we have a lot of pens, and we to grab all the pens and sanitize them. But yesterday was a good idea. We can't do it for the checks, but the little pencils, or just disposable or whatever it is. But we've been sanitizing our pens, and we haven't, I don't feel it's a problem. It may be in a very fast-paced place. That would be a great option.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of options for contactless, and you can definitely talk to your POS provider about that, because it's very common, which is great, and it just adds another level of care. I have a friend who has a restaurant in Seattle, and they actually have a pretty large host stand, which is also a service station right at the exit. And what they're having people do is paying the check before they depart. So they actually come up and they can use the contactless kiosk there right before they leave the restaurant, which is another sort of nice gesture. It's a little bit different, but it's nice to have them, approach and keep their credit card in their hand at all times. Right. Let's see. We had a couple of cool questions here. Any ideas about? This is an interesting question. How do you feel about concepts involving mechanical or robotic service? This is from Michael Sherman. This was a question before the panel started.
We kind of talked about this before. I think that people are going out because they really want the hospitality. They want that interaction. They want that feeling of being taken care of. They've been cooking at home and whatnot. I think the robotic service, fits more in a quick service environment where something's delivered, you pay it, you order and pay at a kiosk, a robot or whatever, or a conveyor belt drops off your food, something like that. I think it more fits to a QSR. People who are dining out are desperate to dine out and want that interaction, want that service, want to be taken care of. I think the robot and the service kind of takes away from what they're craving right now.
Yeah, and I'd say less robots, but more contactless. So contactless handles in the bathroom, anything where people don't have to touch things. There's so many innovations in that area. I've seen a lot of people start to update their restaurants with some of those things. And I just want to throw out that as an operator, we've talked about a number of things that you can update or spend money on. You don't necessarily have to. But you do have to be aware that if people are touching things, that you want to be overt about the sanitizing moment, or again, holding doors, et cetera, making it easy for them to feel like they can keep clean. So I think that's something that's important to know, because it feels like things get very expensive. In the interest of time, we had one more question, then I want to keep it really brief. But what do we all think about paper menus versus digital menus? Mm-hmm. Joann, I love that you had paper menus, and then you created this sort of table culture moment of circling and interacting with the menu. I love that. And are you going to go digital?
Well, I really wanted to go. I've been wanting to go digital for a long time, and I've been researching it, and I do have the capability of doing it, but at the end of the day, I decided not to because of the technology glitches. And I didn't want someone to be sitting in the restaurant and struggling with technology. That wasn't the experience that I wanted to give my guests. So though I think that the technology is there or almost there, I haven't really been able to find one software that fully meets our needs, though we're working on it. I still feel that our customers want the menu, and we use disposable. I just print menus and we throw them out. It's one use.
Right.
I have a friend in DC that has multiple concepts, and she said that it tends to be a little bit generational, that they're older guests or regular guests who are comfortable. They want the menu, they want to be flipped through the wine list, where younger, more used to digital, more comfortable with digital, where they do the QSR code and they're comfortable doing that. So she said it's really a mix, that they have, even though they have QSR code or the tech aspect, they also have paper menus for people who really want to hold the menu in their hand and look at it in that way. I think we're going to keep finding that because we have just a generational issue and the tech, right? But there are lots of companies that are offering different options for that tech. The other thing that I heard that was a great menu idea, just quickly because I know we're running out of time, is menu boards. If you have a smaller menu, a menu board, a blackboard or a whiteboard that has your menu on it that either you can hang strategically, or if it's desserts, they bring it to the table and kind of show it to the table while they're explaining what the desserts are, so that there's no touch there except for the service staff. So those are other options if you don't want to be wasting paper and the QSR doesn't work for you. There are other options that you could do that type of thing depending on the size of your menu.
Great options. So we're just at the end of our time. I want to thank Joann for joining us, Beatrice for being a great partner in this, and all of you for joining us today. We've had a really great turnout and incredible questions. We can't get to all the questions, unfortunately, but you have our information here. We invite you to reach out to any of us to continue the conversation. We will also be putting the recorded version of this on our individual websites, so feel free to join us there or share it with other people who weren't able to tune in today. But please send any additional questions our way. We imagine this won't be the last webinar that we have on this topic. So thank you very much for joining, and we hope to see you again soon. Stay safe.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joann.
Bye, Kate.